guys, Zack here, and this is my review of Solar Opposite. Okay, so this one is interesting and fun in that essentially what happens is the Solar Opposites get reported to Child Protective Services for their shenanigans, but with a bit of a twist to it. So the episode opens up with Korvo being upset at Terry because, as it turns out, Terry apparently promised Korvo to paint that they would paint the ceiling white, and specifically eggshell white because that's the color Korvo suggested. But then when they looked up to discover a bit of a graphic but classy picture of I'm not even going to explain it. Watch the episode. I'm not even going to dignify that with an explanation. Just watch the episode. It's a little bit difficult to explain, but you'll understand completely. But in case Korvo is upset about the fact that Terry did not in fact listen to him and decide to actually paint it, even though this was something Korvo wanted to do. And then the replicants come in using the paint guns to actually just splatter each other, and Terry jumps in, and eventually Korvo just gets sick of it, pointing out that this was something that they were supposed to do as a family. And he openly admits that he's tired of constantly having to work around everybody else's schedule, and pointing out that he's tired of having to constantly remind everybody that he's the lead. But in case when he finally points out that they need to stop screwing around, he decides to pull out the titular Gargoyle array, and claims that he's going to just turn them all into gargoyles so that they stop messing up his stuff. And by accident, he accidentally zaps the neighbor's house from across the street, and accidentally zaps her husband's dialysis machine, unfortunately, by accident, which is obviously something he needs, obviously, but she just points out that she's tired of the aliens across the street constantly turning everything into gargoyles, pointing out that all of her stuff has been turned into gargoyles a lot, and she's starting to get sick of it. So she decides to actually call Child Protective Services, because she's tired of them going around without supervision, and it's obvious that somebody needs to step in and take care of it. And as she's doing it, her husband gets zapped as well, which much to her chagrin. But in any case, eventually, Child Protective Services does in fact arrive at the Scorpion's household. And but at this point, Terry and Korvo is currently in a gurney. He's trying to paint the ceiling, and he and Terry are screwing around with a bucket of paint, while Yumulak and Jesse are currently doing the taxes. Which so when the guys come in, they respond that they have an anonymous tape for how the fact that that somebody was getting turned into the gargoyles, and they're not entirely sure who to take, because obviously you've got Yumulak and Jesse who are currently doing taxes, and they note that that's something that a human that the adult normally does. But they also note that Terry and Korvo, who are in a normal situation would be the parents, are notably taller, and that of course causes concern. So they decide that the best way to actually solve this situation is with a aptitude test. And Terry and Korvo ultimately fail, although they admit that the reason that they fail is because they failed because it binds against plant-based life forms, and they are taken away. And also Terry remarks that he also has attention issues. But they're taken away. But Korvo points out that maybe he'll be sent to a new family where he can do what he wants. But in case they're dragged away, Terry and Korvo also fight over who gets to ride shotgun, even though neither of them in this situation would be riding shotgun, and they are unfortunately hauled off and dragged away. And the replicants kind of just watch and wave, and but also ask the protective services guy what's going to happen, and they point, and he merely makes a joke about it, unfortunately. And well, it's kind of a mess-up joke, but it is a joke nonetheless, where they go, well, actually, if they're lucky, they'll be bounced around the system a lot indefinitely, and eventually will become prostitutes on the street, which Jesse points out that Terry will actually most likely excel at. But in case they're dragged away, and they point out that that's a little bit upset that their family has gotten broken up, but then realize that they have to go to school at school, and they can't really worry about it, so they get into so they go onto the school bus and get ready to drive off. And from here, it actually winds up splitting up into a couple of groups where the pupa is established to like playing with the paints and constantly colors himself so they can't tell what color he is, to the point where they accidentally sacrificed a dude by accident because they thought he was actually purple, when in actuality he was nowhere near purple. But in case throughout the episode, the pupa is painting something on the ceiling and also eating the paint and going a little bit crazy because of it. But yeah, throughout the episode, we do eventually see what it is. And I'm just going to bring up the pupa right now because throughout the episode, the pupa is established to just been working on a mural while everybody else is doing their own relevant stuff. And we eventually find out that the pupa paints a picture of his family, which he then takes a mental picture of and then promptly covers up with the color that Korvo picked out. And this is just a sweet little character building moment where the pupa, and of course I'll explain this in a minute, but it's just established that the pupa very much loves his family, and notably is sad when all four of them are gone for the time being. But in case, at this point, it's the episode that proceeds to break up into three little subplots. First and foremost, you've got Terry and Korvo who have been moved to Child Protective Services. And what we find out is that the Protective Services building has to share with a wing shop, which Terry and Korvo are happy with, but also point out is kind of a little bit messed up. But hey, in case they start eating wings while waiting to be relocated, and it's at one point where Terry points out that maybe he should add some of his special Terry sauce to it, but tells Korvo he's not allowed to have any because obviously they're bickering a little bit, but. He then squirts something from his elbow onto it, which is gross. But of course one of the guys from Child Services notices this and points out that he may in fact be somebody that can be sent to a gifted thing, and that they can use him for a new project, and proceeds to send a coded message to somebody over the phone. Meanwhile, and eventually the social services guys do eventually split Terry and Korvo up. Terry is sent to a quote-unquote special place where kids special like him are sent, but and Terry and of course Terry, they tell Korvo this, and Korvo is excited because it means he gets to finally be the solo act in his own family now. So he's very happy about that. And of course, he's then proceeded to be put on a bus where he's with the other orphans and he's taken off to be moved into his new families. And also, the two guys there are notably greet them like they're prisoners on getting ready to go to prison. But they are dressed up in fun little onesie outfits, and do make a thing about how they're former Marines, but that also points out that they're actually not that bad guys, and do proceed to point out that they are actually happy that everybody's going to get ready to go to a new family, but. In any case, this then splits off into an A story and a B story where Terry and Korvo go on their separate ways and are forced to go into different things. Terry winds up getting into a special service special kids program with what is it? Terry and with a run by just a guy who's called the Doctor and his assistant Dr. Wilson, who and she openly is very confused, is kind of watching the whole thing, but notes that seems like everybody is just monitoring everybody's potential, and we find, and there's a couple of kids like this who seemingly just have a bunch of different things that they can do, but notably none of them are particularly what you would call special. They're definitely talented kids, but none of them have any real special powers, but in any case, they then stops when they notice that Terry is able to name all the Real Housewives, which is something that no kid has ever been able to do before, and the doctor merely points out that he may in fact be the one, and tells Dr. Wilson to prep him for surgery, even though Dr. Wilson then points out that it seems like a bad thing, and that she hasn't really been comfortable with her job for a while now, but she points out that obviously these are good kids who really haven't done anything, but her supervisor merely tells her to just work on it anyway, and that he doesn't really care as long as they can continue to do their evil plans, and he proceeds to walk off. But in case, Dr. Wilson then points out that she's not particularly happy with the fact that any of this suffering has to happen, and points out that somebody needs to do something, but then it winds up being her lunch break, so she stops. But in any case, she then goes in to check on Terry, who as it turns out seems to be fine. He points out that he actually has his Nintendo Switch. He has a couple of all of his other things, and he's just very cozy. But and also he wound up painting his mural on the ceiling again, which Dr. Wilson's remarked is classy, and also Terry makes a comment about how she looks like several different actresses, but in any case, Dr. Wilson then tells him that they need to get him out of there, because as it turns out, there's going to be bad things are going to be happening to him, specifically butt stuff, which Terry immediately panics over because he doesn't have a butt. Which she remarks is even worse, and they immediately flee and get into her car. But then are prepared to make an escape through the famous tunnel. But what we find, because of Korvo's thing, and I'll explain this briefly because it is part of the thing for Terry's thing. But Korvo winds up getting into an accident. I'll explain that. Korvo was riding in his bus, and then the tour bus comes by from Famous Bridge, where it's filmed in daylight. There's a tour bus for the film Daylight, who is taking a tour through the tunnel, but then another vehicle winds up spinning out and hitting a gas tanker that blows the whole tunnel up, and everybody both on the tour bus and in the child services bus winds up getting stuck in there. So for that reason, Terry is unable to actually leave through the tunnel, but Dr. Wilson proclaims that there is another way, and she manages to get him out of there, and continues to drive, and then eventually they do arrive at a gas station where to get some food. Now several hours later, and she wakes Terry up, telling him that they're stopping to get food, and tells him that they're going to be putting him in a new program that will actually treat him like the special kid he is, and also points out that she'll be with him every step of the way. At which point she asks Terry if he wants anything, but then discovers that he's not actually a kid. He openly admits that he would like some scotch, which she knows no kid would ask for, and after looking through his bag, discovers that he's actually in fact a grown-up, and Terry points out that should have been obvious, since he never said he was a kid, and also he doesn't look like one. But and Dr. Wilson, realizing that she threw away her entire life's research for nothing, abandons Terry at the gas station, throws his Nintendo Switch out the window, and drives off. And that is the last we ever see of Terry for this episode. But meanwhile, Korvo is currently stuck in the bus, and he's currently trying to and everybody's currently gathering up and trying to figure out what exactly is going on. And of course they're trying to figure out how the best way to actually get out of the tunnel is. And of course the tunnel is starting to flood, but of course it's at this point where Sylvester Stallone shows up, because he starred in Daylight, and what we find out is that he was actually riding on the tour bus completely incognito, and was just hiding out on the tour bus. But and of course he points out that he just likes doing that to see people's reaction. But then Amelia assumes a leadership role in an effort to actually get everybody out and try to get everybody safe. And what it quickly becomes apparent is that Korvo has a lot of problems letting people take the lead. That's been established in this episode. It's been established that he has trouble letting people take the lead. So the fact that Sylvester Stallone shows up and tries to take over and tries to take what he believes is his role as a leader, and as the hero, he's not particularly happy about that. And of course eventually tries to break the group up in two to actually try and do some things his way, while Sylvester tries to do things his way. But Of course, Korvo eventually does manage to convince the two people who were on the bus with him to come with him, but what we quickly find out is that Korvo is just not a very good leader. He leads the two guys through, but then they get attacked by alligators, who Sylvester warns them about, but they wind up getting attacked by alligators, and Korvo just decides to cut his losses and return back. Lying to Sylvester about the fact that they managed to get them all to safety and is now here to help the rest of them. Of course, as Korvo comes back, the floor underneath him actually winds up collapsing while he's in the tunnel, and he almost goes down, and Sylvester winds up trying to save him from the hole, and which Korvo denies and tries to play off as him saving Sylvester rather than the other way around, even though Sylvester Stallone remarks that makes absolutely zero sense. And of course, Sylvester winds up falling into the hole, but manages to save himself, and also pulls one of the child services guys safe, who merely remarks that Korvo left him to die like a dick. But it's at this point where Korvo points out that obviously leaderships and things have gone wrong, but does point out that he's more than willing to take the leadership, and also points out that it's not unlike that Sylvester Stallone likely has let some people die. But then proceeds to continue to try and take the lead, and eventually Sylvester Stallone gets tired of him trying to take the lead and just knocks him out and drags him to the surface with everybody else. So yeah, they wind up getting out, and also they wind up getting. Sylvester Stallone just wanted to make some references to a lot of the things that the real Sylvester Stallone has been in, such as Daylight, a couple of his other movies, and overall, he just makes a lot of Sylvester Stallone references. And honestly, considering that he's the fictional character of the same name, that makes sense. I do like that. That's a thing. But in case he eventually does, in fact, pull Korvo to the surface, and after Korvo wakes up and comes to, Sylvester asks him if he's all right, and Korvo responds that he's fine. But and of course, it's at this point where Korvo finally realizes that, where Sylvester points out that obviously he knows that Korvo doesn't seem like he should always be the lead sometimes, but he also points out that he's also been learning that sometimes he gives a very good advice about how to help Korvo, but he points out that sometimes he wasn't able to take the lead on a film either, pointing out that in his line of work there have been other successful actors that have taken the role instead of him, and he's just been happy to play second fiddle to them, and points out that Korvo needed to learn that lesson as well, since obviously Korvo's not going to be able to be in charge of everything, and that sometimes you just need to know where your place is. And it's at this point where Korvo realizes that he does in fact know where his place is, and tells Sylvester Stallone to take him home, and he does, revealing that he actually kept a truck from one of his movies, and that he's going to take Korvo home in it, and also asks Korvo if he would like to see some of the other props that he has, pointing out that he keeps props from all of his movies, and Korvo lights up and is implied to have been checking out props the entire way home. And finally, you have the replicants who arrive at school, and it's Wednesday. It's a hump day, and what we find out is that the Stacys, their bullies, have actually worked things out with the teachers so that they can bully people on Wednesdays again. Even though the replicants pointed out that shouldn't have been a thing, and do know that seems to be hump day. That it is in fact hump day, and also note that. The Stacys have also started outsourcing their bullying by forcing Jesse and Yummy to bully each other, and rather than the Stacys just doing it. And of course they ask at one point Principal Cooke comes by, and they ask Principal Cooke if he could help them. But what we find out is that Principal Cooke is having a bit of a rough day, and he's not particularly interested in talking to students. But and also drops the ice pop that he's holding, which he winds up freaking out over, and wonders why nobody loves and appreciates him. And they do note that Principal Cooke seems to be going through some stuff. But in case Jesse does point out currently has Yummy suspended by his undies, because that's what the Stacys have asked them to do. But they do point out that maybe they could use the Psyche Ray to actually try and connect with the Stacys so that they stop bullying them, and point out that maybe if they can figure out how the Stacys work, that they can get inside their head. And sure enough, after being forced to bully each other, they do decide to do exactly that. They go get the Psyche Ray, which as we find out is designed to literally send somebody inside their head. and Jesse tells Yumulak to keep hold of it, and wait until he gives the signal. And of course they go she goes into the girls' bathroom following the Stacy's, but quickly discovers that Principal Cooke is actually currently in the bathroom, and what we find out is that he's currently cooking beef stroganoff, and he's not supposed to be doing that on school property anymore. And he points out that if he's caught doing it, he will lose his job. But and of course, Jessie points out that this is all a little bit too much to take in, and she has no idea how to respond to this. At which point, Yumulak barges in, zaps Principal Cooke with the Psyche Ray, and the two are sucked into his mind, where we find out why he's been nasty to Jessie and Yumulak this whole time, and by extension, all the other kids he's in charge to keep look of. So first and foremost, they're immediately beamed into what is seemingly a white room, which Yumulak points out is exactly what you expect from a square of a principal, and of course, in true bingeable made for streaming TV show fashion, Yumulak remarks that he doesn't really know how the braid works, even though Jessie points out that he should have run the instruction first, and remarks that luckily she did. But and of course they make a comment about how Yumulak needs her to explain it to him in bingeable streaming show format. But so she then proceeds to go on to explain that all they have to do is find Principal Cooke's inner child, and they will be able to get out of his head. And they quickly leave the right room to discover that it's a massive mindscape that is just a jumble of several other things. And they note that Principal Cooke is actually a lot deeper than they thought he was. So, and after looking around, they discover that Principal Cooke, that Principal Cooke's father is not nice to him. As we find out, Principal Cooke called him out for he just openly admits that he wished that his kid died in a miscarriage, which is dark and messed up. And they do point, and Jessie points out that that's clear that Principal Cooke has some dad issues. But then they see a giant beast that comes toward him, and Yumulak thinks that might be the inner child that they need to find. But then they note that he's actually holding the ice pop that Principal Cooke dropped earlier, and notes that it is in fact not his inner child, but his inner rage. And if they get caught by it, he will absolutely be destroyed. He will absolutely be destroyed, and retreat deeper in the mindscape to try and get away from Cooke's inner rage. In an effort to try and find the inner child. But what they quickly know is that it's taking forever, and they notably have gotten a bit lost, and by this point they're in this giant staircase type area, and they're looking around trying to figure out where they're supposed to go. But it's at this point where the inner child eventually inner rage eventually follows them and chases after them, and eventually Yumulak notices a portrait that seems to be a memory from Principal Cooke's life, and he quickly figures out that they need to jump into the portrait Super Mario 64 style, which Jessie points out that they can't do because that she doesn't really understand all the boomer stuff. But Super Mario 64 is just old. It's very old at this point. But of course Yumulak tells her that they had no choice and they retreat in, and then we find out that Principal Cooke, his father just did not like him. What we find out is that Principal Cooke, he used to practice trumpet all the time, but what we find out is that Principal Cooke's dead. Is that Principal Cooke has a younger brother who, as it turns out, was named for the fact that he could actually play the trumpet, and that Principal Cooke would never actually be good enough to play the trumpet, and also remarks that to the reason that his name is quite literally Principal Cooke. He was named Principal because that is the job that his dad wanted him to have. And every time he tried to practice the trumpet, his dad would yell at him and take it away from him and force him to focus on his pro's dreams of becoming a principal. And of course they quickly realize that Principal Cooke has had a very rough life, and then proceed to comment whether that this may in fact be why they were sent into Principal Cooke's mind in the first place. They realize now that Principal Cooke had a horrible life, and that they actually need to help him and further understand him, and that the reason they're there is because that was where they were meant to be. They were meant to figure out why Principal Cooke is so stressed all the time in order to help him sort out his emotional baggage. Which of course Yummalak points out is too nihilistic and depressing for their episode, so they decide to drop the topic. At which point the inner rage proceeds to find them again, and they then discover that they didn't discover where Cooke's inner child is, and it discovers that it is actually an old decrepit looking version of his bedroom. So they retreat into that memory. But what they discover is that it's actually a American Girl doll, which they note looks a little bit like Principal Cooke, but doesn't seem to be his inner child. At which point the inner rage approaches them and it appears and tries to attack them, and they retreat as the inner rage tries to destroy the bedroom. But they eventually find a picture of Principal Cooke with his brother, and they eventually figure out why Principal Cooke's inner child has actually become his inner rage. It used to be his inner child, but all the pent-up frustration that he deals with on a regular basis has turned his inner child into his inner rage, and that is why he's become so stressed out and cynical. And of course they quickly realize that they need to actually do something with Principal Cooke and help him. So they decide that the best way to do that is with Jazz. Since that was where the source of all of Principal Cooke's stress happens, they figured it might as well be the way they actually deal with it. So of course, and this is as Principal Cooke has actually been apparently called in by the school board to actually talk about the fact that he's been cooking beef stroganoff, and he does remark that yes, he did cook the beef stroganoff on school grounds again, which the council told him not to do, but he also remarked that it wasn't very good. But they're then prepared to suspend him and fire him, but then Principal Cooke has a bit of a breakdown when the inner child starts destroying things, and it is at this point where Jesse and Yummalak start doing a little bit of a jazz riff, which they know is bordering on cultural appropriation, but they realize that in this one particular instance it's probably okay. And they start doing a jazz riff, which causes the inner child to slowly calm down and eventually become the inner child again, which enables Principal Cooke to finally which both A enables Jesse and Yummalak to get out, but also B causes Principal Cooke to become a lot happier, and he starts doing a jazz riff in front of the school board, which causes them to realize that he made to just kind of give him his job back, because he seems a lot happier in doing his job now. And of course Jesse and Yummalak find out that that's another problem solved, but then they get their asses kicked by the Stacys, and they realize that it's still Wednesday, so they realize that they didn't really solve anything. But in case with all of that nonsense, everybody finally arrives home, and they all realize that they actually wound up learning the exact same lesson about how they need to sometimes not let people take the lead and not kind of be a complete control freak. And Korvo then remarks that he learned this lesson by realizing that Terry was just trying to express himself, and that he shouldn't have stressed about it, and then tells Terry that they can paint whatever they want on the ceiling, but Terry doesn't really understand what their actual purpose is, and of course Jesse and Yummalak point out that they've learned the exact same lesson, because they realize that they were able to help Principal Cooke work through his problems and actually become a much better person. And then the pupa walks in covered in paint, and they just remark that the pupa seems to be they just remark that the pupa is useless and a screw up. But honestly, the pupa is getting yelled at for painting a loving mural of his family that he then promptly covered up. But he smiles because he's happy because his family is all together again. And honestly, that's just a thing. And of course, Principal Cooke. It ends with Principal Cooke going to go see his brother at the graveyard, and goes to go visit his brother. And he remarks that he realizes he hasn't visited his brother now, but he also remarks that he realizes that now he's going to honor his legacy by continuing his life and continuing to pick up the trumpet. And though he notably isn't very good at practicing the trumpet, he does wind up picking up to practicing the trumpet again, and has finally moved on from his trauma from his childhood. So yeah, now he's moved on and become a much happier person, which is a good thing. But in any case, yeah, this episode overall was just about just letting people, just not trying to be a control freak all the time, and letting people take the lead sometimes, which is a good thing. It's a thing that people need to do sometimes. It's just sometimes people just get so wrapped up in their head and what they want to do that they just won't let anybody else have any say in the matter. But and of course, this entire episode is because of the fact that everybody got picked up by child services. So yeah, that's it. So that not really, not, it doesn't really, it didn't really start off as one of those morals about not taking the lead, but it sure ended that way. But in any case, yeah. That's gonna do it for my review of Solar Opposites. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. We're over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. It's only a couple bucks a month. It does really help me out. And you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks that are my way of saying thanks. So be sure to check those out. Link is down in the description. And finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent one. It may or may not be this one. Whereas the bottom video is the video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So if you want to try something new, or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. As next time, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace!